butterfly. The code, the brand, the lifestyle.
About how they open the door and get us every time. This game is about mind control. Mind control. And once we understand and accept death as just another aspect of what we are, another part of our journey, then we'll be able to beat this life as a cinch.
And fall in love with death. The book of the law says you should long for death and love for death. Now, what is this talking about here? Now, Alan Boyd Kuhn wrote his book, Lost Life, and he made an observation that other Egyptologists couldn't do, and guess what? I guess that's why his shit ended up being banned and suppressed. And he says the fact stands that
expedient to substitute the more concrete idea of a personal Messiah who would be so obviously factual and realistic as to preclude the possibility of being misconceived by the most dotish. The swell of this tide of force carried the church fathers to the limit of recasting the entire gospel in the terms of a human biography, so that what had been originally in the mysteries and the sacred scripts a combined astrological and mythical dramatization of man's total experience was now turned into the story of one character put forth as a life.
Because a lot of the consciousness is rooted in the ego being strong.
Woo! That's a breakthrough. People don't even realize that. Because the consciousness is rooted in the ego being stronger, so we prevent the higher advanced souls. That's a breakthrough, brother. I gotta put that on TikTok or some shit.
Electromagnetic. I am that I am that I am that I am that I am.
What we working with?
Yo. Darkness around me. Channeling that darkness inside. Focus, that's the things that I will see. All real niggas divine is the mind, yeah. All real niggas divine is the mind, and we manifesting darkness around me. Channeling that darkness inside. Focus, that's the things that I will see. All real niggas divine is the mind, yeah. All real niggas divine is the mind. I'ma focus on that darkness around me, bringing all that darkness inside.
To remember is that once we got all excited about Chem and Kemet, when you actually study into the mystery, you would find it would look to the common eye that they were obsessed with death. So the scientists, the occultists, which I follow, as Brother Sadnetta just said, in the footsteps of Bobby Hemmett, as the occultist is to understand the mystery or the science of why they were doing what they were doing, for understanding, as you already accepted, that they were doing this for higher reasons. And one of the things we found out that in the 17th dynasty, I believe, I remember Dr. Africa talking about this as someone, that's when they started writing all these hieroglyphs, meaning they came into an understanding that we would forget this. And so if they understood we would forget this, and what message did we decide to leave ourselves? What would be the most important thing we said? And when you deal with these hieroglyphs, it's nothing but death. If they knew we were going to be in this situation, we haven't heard anything about health, economics, all the things that we have learned to put our energy into as something to save us. None of the Egyptians were writing about that. They wrote about death, how to die and never come back. So when you study, there are things that are pretty in the field of the study that are a little bit more straightforward about death and what happens. But ultimately, when you study all the mythology, all the ancient thought, you'll find that in some way or another, in some sort of coded way, they were trying to let you know, you need to die and not come back here. Your true enemy is humanity. Humanity is your true enemy. Everything else are just distractions or added on. If you wasn't human, we wouldn't have nothing to talk about. If you could get beyond humanity, then you don't need to talk about health. You don't need to talk about law. You don't need to talk about nothing but dying and not coming back. And guess what? That's what the Egyptians were doing. That's what they were doing. So if we like to romanticize like Wakanda about shit that don't even exist, Because we do know in our heart who and what we are. So when we see something like that, it kind of resonates with us, even though the reality of today is made up to appease us, to make us feel good on the screen that we made a score about Wakanda, even though they psychologically attacked us and thereby we let the CIA in. I could go on for days about how they open the door and get us every time. This game is about mind control. Mind control. And once we understand and accept death as just another aspect of what we are, another part of our journey, then we'll be able to beat this life as a cinch. If we think all of our eggs are in living as a human, then we could be manipulated. We can be mind control. All the problems we have is based upon us investing in something that we was actually pretty much over at one point. That's what the Egyptians were doing. It's about getting out of here. So if we're trying to stay here instead of residence, and I could tell you mythologies where they teach you Shiva, Hanuman, shit down to Charlie in the chocolate factory, where there's a mythology where these kings want to build houses in this place. Shiva and actually Charlie said, I'm gonna make your house or your kingdom out of chocolate, but you can't live in it. So what they're trying to say symbolically is you're passing through here. You see the movie Riddick, one of my favorite was a very heavy metaphysical chakra story, the first Riddick, with Lord Marshall. When he lands in crematoria, which represented the root chakra, what he said, well, are you going to take residence here? How long is your bid? He said, no, I'm just passing through. The Masonic man who's saying, I'm just a traveler. What they're trying to tell you, this was all code for you. You're not supposed to take residence here. The fight is not, like I said, there's levels of it. You know what I'm saying? And if you feel compelled to do that, everybody needs to do everything they feel they came here to do. At the end of the day, this is a whole learning process.
More sass, nigga. Now don't lie, I ain't gonna lie, I took 2 big ass teaspoons of sea moss today. Ain't nobody here shitting on that sea moss, boy. That shit make you feel like a nigga. And then I made a whole goddamn beat. You heard? I was like this. I made all that shit this morning, nigga, before you got here.
What are you holding as your truth? Where are your perspectives coming from? You see what I'm saying? Because a lot of times persons hold things to be true and hold things to be a foundation and from a literal perspective that are not supposed to be taken from that perspective. So what are your perspectives coming from? Is it a sound perspective? Is it a sound foundation? Or is it coming from a divine understanding of self? Is it coming from the perspective of, let's say, 65% of the so-called world right now, where they see divinity coming from a part of them that is exterior, some of them, and then some of them see divinity as being something completely outside of them, something completely ungraspable that they could never even understand, not realizing that they are in presence, the divinity that they seek. Which perspective is yours? Be real about it. Let's have a conversation about it in the comment section. What's your perspective on divinity? How do you see yourself? This book, The Lost Light, by Alvin Boy Kuhn, that I'm about to read from, is going to share some insights. It's going to share some insights into understanding that the foundations that we sometimes hold might not be sound, and for those that might still be of a so-called religious perspective, listen keenly to some of the insights, because Alvin Boy Kuhn is one of those authors that is well researched. Alvin Boy Kuhn is one of those authors that is well respected.
Truth crushed to earth. The resolution of the birth of Christ into the delivery of a babe in a localized. Bethlehem has kept the race from realizing the true meaning of the messianic fulfillment, with the 3rd century conversion of the features of the age-old spiritual drama into the alleged biography of a man-savior. The outlines of the great truth that array of the solar logos was incorporated distributively in animal humanity faded out and were obliterated. All sound sense of the inner signification of the Christmas nativity tableau was irrevocably lost. The annual celebration of the advent of deity to earth remains a meaningless travesty to this day. It becomes necessary, then, to outline the historical trends that led to the obscuration of this central feature of religious cultism. This is in no sense a diversion, but the most direct approach to the correct envisagement of ancient material. It will reveal items of the utmost strategic importance for a true esoteric message. It was reintegrated eclectically around Alexandria by such syncretists as Maximius of Tyre, Ammonius Saccas, and Philo Judaeus, powerfully influencing the character of primitive Christianity. It was carried most directly into Christian documentation by St. Paul, whom many scholars claim on evidence to have been himself an initiate in the Greek mysteries, and also by St. John, whose Bible writings are decidedly more Platonic than distinctively Christian. The visible thread of its transmission runs onto Plutarch, after whom it became more subterranean, being propagated by Hermeticists, Therapeutae, Rosicrucians, Platonists, mystics, Illuminati, alchemists, brothers of various designations and secret fraternities in Europe, out of sight of the jealous eye of the all-powerful Church. At the period of its lowest ebb in Europe, it was tided over the danger of total extinction by Arabian and Moorish scholars and Jewish students in Spain. The teaching was preserved and handed on by such associations in medieval Europe as the cathedral builders, the Platonic Academy of Florence, the alchemists, the fire philosophers, the troubadours, and minnesingers by secret printers, among them Aldus Manutius of Venice, who were printed the classic Greek literature that ushered in the Italian Renaissance. Sporadically, now in one region, now in another, it took form in outward movements and groups of mystic and pietistic tendency of many names. It was the secret spring of motive and meaning in most medieval literature, in the folklore, the hero legends, the fairy myths, the Arthurian cycle, the Mabinogian tales, the Perugia stories, the Nibelungen, the castle ballads, the romance of the rose, and many another invention of esoteric skill. 52 features of it came to be embodied in 1,000 conventional forms of common superstition. It was pictorially outlined in the set of tarot cards of The Bohemians in the 12th century, philosophers such as Paracelsus, Raymond Lully, Plato, Cardano, Philalides, Robert Flood, from whose work on Moses Milton is said to have derived his theses on which paradise lost was built, and others presented aspects of it in more or less surreptitious fashion. Jacob Boehm's theosophical points vitally influenced Newton's thought in important directions, as he confesses. Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo acknowledged their debt to the principles of the ancient science. Later, 52, The Lost Light 52, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, tamed the English Platonists More and Cudworth, and it is alleged that Francis Bacon and the mysterious Countessant Germain formulated the body of Masonic ritualism upon the old principles. Coming to the surface again in recent years, it is being revived by Rosicrucians, Theosophists, Kabbalists, Esotericists, mystics, spiritual and psychic scientists, and parapsychologists in large numbers, and is perhaps the most vital movement in the thought life of today. The door to this rejuvenescence of an influence so long buried was opened during the last century by the studies in comparative religion and comparative mythology assiduously pursued by many scholars. There needed nothing but a mind free from bias to discern the unity amounting virtually to identity underlying all the old systems, which express so clearly the characteristic features of what appeared to have been a universal, primal world religion with the solar myth as its cornerstone. Every great historical religion is readily seen to have been, at its start, a pure expression of the basic elements of this outline, and equally readily seen to have badly vitiated the pristine purity of teaching in later decadence. A gross transgressor in this respect is seen to be Christianity, which carried original spiritual meaning further afield than perhaps any other. It is desirable to trace the causes and progress of this corruption. The blanket assertion that ancient spiritual light was darkly obscured under Christian handling is a challenging statement and must be given the room to vindicate itself. This work in its entirety will amount to a substantiation of that claim. The point can be carried only by an ample reproduction of the substance of the archaic world religion, so that the clear outlines of the great, pristine doctrines of theology as they were apprehended in the arcane schools may by contrast reveal the darkness, 53, and vacuity of present readings. Only in the light of the radiant wisdom of the past will the glaring corruption of current interpretation become discernible. The stream of degradation of originally pure teaching flowed in through the channels of literalism. The simple but still nearly incredible truth of the matter is that elaborate charts of spiritual ideography, devised with poetic genius and analogical skill, were mistaken for literal objective fact. The ancient theologists had sought to portray the essence of deep truth by means of 53, The Lost Light 53, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, fanciful constructions of many kinds. The whole of early Egyptian and Greek religious literature was a construction commonly termed mythology. What now looms as the consummate catastrophic stupidity of the centuries was the tragicing of it into alleged history. This has been perpetrated in spite of the obvious impossibility of explaining how a people that produced Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Pericles, Heraclitus, Homer, Pindar, and Demosthenes could gull itself into taking poetic fiction for objective occurrence on a grand scale. Our explanation of the mythology of the Greeks commits us to accrediting such sages with the minds of children. The myths were the lenses through which the gaze might be focused on the realities of recondite truth. Only to the crudely ignorant were the representations not diaphanous. But, oddly enough, blind misapprehension carried the day, and the transparency of the myths was darkened into solid opaqueness. Christianity started out as a system closely kindred with the cults environing it and boasting of conformity with them. The early church father, Justin Martyr in particular, is at pains to protest that Christianity in no wise differs from pagan usages, but a strange and curious thing then happened. There came to a head a virulent rebellion of mediocrity and inferiority against the aristocracy of intellect and culture. Christianity carried in large measure the impetuosity of this revolt. It became the embodied expression of a vehement assault on the esotericism of the mystery religions. It was evidently motivated by a popular resentment against the exclusiveness and aristocracy of the cults. Only a restricted and tested minority was eligible to admission into the associations. The hidden teachings preaching was withheld from the populace under the strictest of secret bans. A wave of hostility to the privileged groups swept over the masses and culminated in an effort to crash through the restrictions of esotericism and bring out the secret. 54. Doctrine for general behoof. Distrust of the possession of any real truth. The unordinary grasp and perhaps the degeneracy of the mysteries themselves to some extent lend substance to the popular enmity. A movement to spread abroad a plain man's simple enunciation of the truths gained heavy momentum. A definite trend away from esotericism carried the impulse far over into literalism. The genius of culture in mankind has constantly had to contend with this effort of dull mediocrity to tear down its best structures of truth and beauty through the attempt to unmask the myths for commonplace. Rendering was quite like the present-day demand upon popular publicists for a reduction of their best wisdom to the level of moronic bluntness. But the effort to simplify the esoteric purport was to lose it, to wreck the spiritual edifice altogether. Truth can make no terms with incapacity. When later the headship of the early church passed out of the hands of the academicians of Athens and Alexandria, of Antioch, Tarsus and Ephesus, and fell into those of the less studied Romans, the trend to literalism had gained such volume that there swept into the movement a spirit of fell vindictiveness against the dominant systems. When the conception of the purely spiritual crystals could no longer successfully be imparted to the turbulent masses who were clamoring for a political savior, it was found necessary or expedient to substitute the more concrete idea of a personal messiah who would be so obviously factual and realistic as to preclude the possibility of being misconceived by the most dotish. The swell of this tide of force carried the church fathers to the limit of recasting the entire gospel in the terms of a human biography, so that what had been originally in the mysteries and the sacred scripts a combined astrological and mythical dramatization of man's total experience was now turned into the story of one character put forth as a life, in spite of almost insuperable obstacles and the outcropping of endless absurdities and inanities of meaning in the transposition. The undertaking was carried through. The outcome has been that the theology handed down to us by the early Reformation is the crudest, least rational, and intellectually most disconcerting rendition of the ancient revelation anywhere extant. Philo, Origen, Clement, and Josephus had expressly declared that Scripture shielded beneath the literal narrative a secret profundity of meaning, which was its true message. Philo specified 4 distinct levels in which the sense of Scripture was to be apprehended: the purely literal, 55, or physical, the moral or emotional, the allegorical or mental, and the anagogical or lofty spiritual. The later church discarded or disregarded the 2 or 3 more abstruse ones and held only to the lowest and the basest. The drive to convert the highly concentrated meat of spiritual truth into pap or milk for the babes in capacity probably gave to Christianity that volcanic fervor that swept it forward among the lower ranks and shortly enabled it to turn the tide against its chief rival, Mithraism. The masses will, always, as they did in Luther's Reformation, seize upon a sweeping current of ideological force and attempt to utilize it as a means of escape from their lowly economic lot. The hopes of the rabble interwove the dream of political liberation with the religious message, adding an extraneous factor to the 55. The Lost Light 55 Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Pressure to translate allegory into a tale of history. Then is now low culture, soon turned from the fervor to achieve the slow laborious task of mastering an inner kingdom of spiritual character to eager expectation of a utopian regime. In world affairs, in the spiritual drama were many lines which could be so misconstrued for. Thus Christianity lost its gnosis, and all Christendom has since had to suffer the blighting of its best spiritual effort. If by the tactic the church may be said to have gained the whole world, it lost its own soul in the process.
To the same experience. Hell, I don't even know if you can handle both of y'all.
I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Don't worry, we can't get us over the blender. He swears by his all-natural sex potion, but it's just Irish moss and Viagra. The coach sees us when we heal.
To the same experience.
May be pain and suffering in the matrix, but in actuality, it is paradise outside this illusionary world. True. You see what I'm saying? Which is the doggone anesthesia. You see what I'm saying? So even our protest that we talk about is all still based on luxury.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Some type of shit that ain't going right in this man's world that you want to go right so you can not have no problems. You see what I'm saying? And so one of the greatest problems ever is to understand death. That's one of the greatest problems ever. We don't understand death. Every day you wake up should be a bad fucking day. Fall in love with death. The book of the law says you should long for death and love for death. Now, what is this talking about here? Now, Allegory wrote his book Lost Light, and he made an observation that other Egyptologists couldn't do, and guess what? I guess that's why his shit ended up being banned and suppressed. And he says the fact stands, they talk about the Egyptians. I want to get this right. The Egyptians, the fact stands that they did call our life here death. And that what we speak of, when we speak of the dead in the sacred books, or in the tongue twister, that is indubitable that they meant living humans. So in so many words, when they speak of the death in the books, they meant living humans. The word death and the dead are used in the old scriptures, refer to living humanity in earthly embodiment. Now that is some profound shit. It's all in the movie Jacob's Ladder. He was dead the whole movie, didn't know it. Motherfucker say, you been dead, man. They even had one on Twilight Zone, a Civil War picture. The guy that was going around and all that, and had all these people walking home and stuff, and the whole thing went on. He didn't even realize he was dead. And the woman and everybody around him was dead. He looked at the soldiers and everybody's dead. That's what's going on here. Let me read that again. The word death, or the dead, are used in the old scriptures referring to living humanity in earthly embodiment. We scurrying mortals are the dead. This is some nightmare shit. Right. You understand? We sitting up here. I'm not talking about dead in consciousness. Right. Truly we are dead in consciousness. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is all this shit we be seeing in these horror movies and in these sci-fi shits. You need to read the scriptures because they ain't got nothing on these scriptures. Right. Now they say that the Egyptians were the most illumined people ever to walk the face of the earth, the Africans. Right. They call them a sage race, a teacher race. Okay? A teacher race. Now, the Egyptians said that we scurrying mortals are the dead of the Bible and other sacred books. And the dead spoken of there is the living existence here. Even they said in Neil, you've been living in a damn dream world. Right. You see what I'm saying? You've been living in a dream world. Even in the Nag Hammett, it was talking about mayhem, corruption, all kind of fucked up things. They say these people are dreaming dreams. So here, Alvin Lloyd Hume figured this shit out by studying the text by 1940. What happened was that he said some shit that the Egyptologists found out by reading the scripture, said, you don't need to put that shit out. Then you understand why you don't get nothing in these same books. You see what I'm saying? But read that again. That's just some profound shit right there. Because that makes it... Recently I had to deal with a whole lot of shit with some stuff that's going on based on some moralism thing. Whether I should be doing this or not. And I have to keep reminding myself, this shit does not exist. We're a bunch of dead people thinking we're alive and been dead millions of years ago. That's what they said. The Egyptians said that there was a group of people that died millions of years ago, a couple thousand years ago, and after they died, this earth and this civilization, all this shit that we come into being is what is left over after these people died. The Greeks say it's something left behind. So it's a big, vast dream.
It's the results of not doing it. We want somebody else to do it for us.
Is there anything you think a soul looks for when, like, say when a soul's ready to incarnate down here and they're looking at a man and a woman and they know they're about to get busy and have sex? Is there any personality traits that this soul looks for, because sometimes the people we call masters, they come from the people we least expected. They may come from a crackhead, they may come from a junkie, they may come from just a regular Joe. They don't come from, sometimes you would think two conscious people produce masters, but it don't work like that all the time. So is there anything that these souls are looking for when they want to come down here, these advanced souls?
Yeah, open channels.
Elaborate on that.
Path of least resistance.
Path of least resistance.
Right, an open channel. So when you let your frequency go to a certain level, it makes the higher beings have a lesser of a struggle becoming one with the individual. And they can bring them up to a higher level faster.
So being conscious could offer resistance sometime, you think, to these souls?
Yeah, because a lot of the consciousness is rooted in the ego being strong.
Woo! That's a breakthrough. People don't even realize that. Because the consciousness is rooted in the ego being stronger, so we prevent the higher advanced souls. That's a breakthrough, brother. I got to put that on TikTok or some shit, man. Go ahead, brother. That's a breakthrough. Like,
right. Well, the struggle with you is between your higher self and your ego self. Your higher self is the one determined to drive you to do your destined purpose and is going to manipulate the hell out of your ego until they get it done. Your ego going to fight back and try to do everything my way that doesn't make sense. Not that it's just doing it your way, it doesn't make sense. So it's defying logic why you doing it your way that makes your higher self rebel. Right. And force you to go down a path that's going to force you to straighten up.
Wow.
And you doing it to yourself the whole time, trying to not be who you are, trying to be who the world told you to be. You got to be who you are. The more you want to be what the world want to be, that's the greater your ego develop. Because your ego is the sum total of all of the things people told you about yourself that you believe, and you use that as a protective defense against the inner child. And the inner child only wants the higher self to parent it and guide it through the world. Right? But the ego take over, smother the inner child, and now he's at war with the higher self. So you find them sitting in the penitentiary for 75 years. They was too real for the streets. That's what we talking about. That energy exchange with the self drives you to put yourself in a circumstance. Your higher self gonna put you wherever you gotta be in order for you to fulfill your life purpose. Yeah, sometimes your life purpose is just to deliver one message to one individual that's in a far distant place from where you currently sit. So it would be one person listening to Brother Rich that got the message they needed to get that changed their life forever. And now you did your whole life mission. Now you can go and about your business and create whatever life you want to after that. So we think when we do our life purpose that it takes our whole life. Sometimes it just takes a class encounter.
Right.
You know, because we help other people to help us.
Rod, I remember one time